Hey everybody, and welcome to another edition of ToneHacks, or maybe we should call today's edition ToneHacks, because I am joined by my friend and colleague Thor Mogensen to talk about our latest pedal, the Sub N Up Octaver, and the TonePrint Editor for it. It was like, when I opened the editor for the Sub N Up the first time, I thought to myself, this is awesome! How does this work? I have no idea. There's so many different EQ options, and I thought maybe you could shed some light on how these different EQs and different modulation types, how they interact.
Yeah, I definitely can. And the thing is actually there's actually more behind the scenes, because for this one particularly, we actually decided, unlike what we've done in the past, to actually remove a couple of parameters that is in the editor we use to create the sounds with, because there's a couple of parameters in there that can really fuck the pedal up to the point where you actually start making noises that might hurt your speakers. I think you guys experienced it when you came in. I was messing about with that one. So we removed those. So I mean, you guys can follow along on the screen down here.
Yep.
So we have the editor up, and I think one of the things that's pretty overlooked in general. Now we're talking about the Sub N Up, but it actually pertains to all the different pedals. Is this thing up here called the templates. First of all, it's pretty nice if you're kind of lost in a sea of parameters.
Like me.
to use it as a starting point. So you can kind of browse through them, and then you can get an idea of what you want, and then you can kind of tweak from there. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is a lot of times the templates are actually moving parameters behind the scene that you can't see. So if you take another pedal, the Hall of Fame, for example, the templates for the plate and for the hall and for the church and all these things are actually moving parameters that you can't see in the real editor. So you're actually getting access to even more behind the scenes. We're just helping a little bit. And the same goes for the Sub N Up Octaver. So all these different templates that you see here, and we just picked one of them, is really moving stuff behind the scenes. And to be very brief about what those parameters are, it's really a way to change the octaver to go from something that's great at doing polyphonic octaving to something that's great at doing monophonic octaving. And the thing is, you can't really have both at the same time.
No, there's always be some kind of compromise.
Yeah, because the way you do a polyphonic octaver is very different from doing a monophonic octaver, and you know what you gain by being able to play multiple notes, you lose a little bit in terms of the character of the notes. So we can maybe show you guys two different examples. So here's something that's a classic kind of monophonic octaver. So it's pretty round and almost synthy sounding. If you try to play a chord,
it doesn't work as well.
It's not as pretty, and if you try to play a complex chord, it messes it up pretty bad. On the other hand, if you try something that's like a regular polyphonic one, you notice that it sounds different. It handles chords way better, but depending on what you like, I mean, you're free to use the polyphonic for everything. But if you like that kind of old school monophonic one, then it's nice to have that option as well in the pedal. So, and that's one of the cool things about the Sub N Up. You can get both types of sounds and everything in between. So that's really, it's like 4 or 5 parameters that are in there that that basically change the characters of the algorithm. And we decided not to allow you guys to have it, because
you would never get anything done. You would just stare at parameters all day long, or at least I would.
Yeah, and plus it doesn't really, it's, if you have a modulation, section, pretty much all guitar players know what depth and speed does, right? But if you get names like sub-Q filter input, there's no way we can actually explain that in any kind of meaningful sense. So we decided just to, make some nice templates, for you guys, and then you can use that as a starting point to tweak from.
Yeah.
So if we look at the actual Octaver, the editor here, it's divided into sections. So we'll just scroll over them, then we can kind of take them one by one and get a little nerdy.
Great idea.
So first up is the Octaver part of it, and it's pretty simple. It's basically levels for the 3 octaves. Octave, 2 octaves down, 1 octave down, 1 octave up, and also a level for the dry signal. So it's basically the same thing that you have access to here. So if I'm messing about with these knobs, you'll see them move on the editor as well.
I can kind of wrap my head around that.
Yeah. But if you only have that, it'll be a little boring because you'd have access to that on the pedal. Then on top of that, we added a clipping circuit, which is basically a little tube emulation overdrive circuit to kind of give you more of a grainy vintage vibe, which we use for some of the tone prints that we've done. We use especially for the monophonic stuff, but it can work for the polyphonic stuff as well, especially if you want to get something along the lines of more organ type sounds.
Yeah, more gnarly synth-like stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's go to the just so you guys can hear it. So we'll go to the classic setting, and I'll just back everything down except from the 1 octave down. Hopefully you can hear this. So now, as you can see, the drive on the sub. So sub means that it's the 1 octave down.
Yep.
Sub 2 means it's 2 octaves down. So in this case, it doesn't do anything because that's only for the sub.
Yeah.
So let's crank this to hear what we get. And of course, you don't have to go as crazy, but you can just add a little bit.
Yeah.
Or make it entirely clean. So, I mean, if you wanted to, you could have like a clean sub, and then you can have a gnarly octave up, and just have those two together. I don't even know how this is.
Is this going to be healthy for the ear?
Which is a pretty cool sound. So that's just 1 octave down, totally clean.
Yeah.
1 octave up, distorted, and no dry signal at all.
Nice.
So, I mean, that pretty much sums up the Octaver part. It's it's levels and it's distortions.
Yep.
Or drives, whatever you want to call it. And of course, I mean, with the I should do this instead of pointing. With the knob selection, knob range. Wow, lovely. I'll shut down some more stuff.
You're a popular guy.
Yes, that's my once in a lifetime SMS from somebody, or text, I should say. There we go. Okay. So, where was I? Oh yeah. So with the knob selection and knob range down there, I mean, right now it's designed so that you have access to the 3 octaves plus the dry signal, just the levels. I mean, you could do something theoretically where you basically said, I don't want to use the sub. It's just too much sub. So you could use that as a gain control for the drive. So just to show you how that would work.
Cool idea.
So in this case, we'd say, well, the sub knob shouldn't control the wet sub 2 level.
Oh.
It should control the
drive section.
Where is it?
Lower.
There we
go.
So let's just say it controls all of them because we want to be able to.
We want all the gain.
We want all the gain in the world. That's a Bond song, isn't it?
I don't know.
There we go. So, and we'll just make sure that the sub 2 is turned all the way down. That's the drive, and we'll make sure that the sub 2 level is down. It is. So now we can use this knob to control the amount of drive. Maybe you'll have the honors of turning this up.
Oh. That's way cool.
So that's just one thing. And of course, just to basically make sure you guys know that right away, you can of course store that to your pedal, in which case it's magically pops up on the TonePrint slot.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do is you can kind of go, oh, I like that. And I actually did quite like this sound. So you can also go store up here. And then you can say, I want to add that as a new entry. I want to name this my Synthy-Winthy sound.
Synthy-Winthy?
Yeah, I know.
It's not very manly.
We'll come up with something
Maximum
better.
gain, come on.
Harry something. So, in which case, it actually now pops up underneath the templates in your own user tone prints. And you can, of course, add as many of those as you want to.
Cool.
So now you can switch between that, and you can go back to this thing, and now you have that there. So that's just maybe reiterating something all you guys already know, but still
really
kind of nice to know.
Yeah.
So next up, let's use the sound we already have now, which is this guy.
The Synthy-Winthy.
Yeah. So let's start messing around with the second section, which is the input EQ.
Yeah.
And
this is where I'm starting to get confused.
Yeah, and I can totally understand why. Basically, it's a way. The EQs is basically a way to tweak the sound and the tonal character of the octaves.
Yeah.
And it only affects the octaves, not the dry signal.
Okay.
So you could say that the input EQ, it also affects the overall tone, but it mainly affects the way that the guitar signal hits the algorithm. So it means that it's a little tough to explain, but it changes the way the algorithm reacts to the tone that it gets, because it's pretty different whether you play a bass or a guitar into it, or if you play a synth, or whether you accentuate certain frequencies. So it's going to react differently depending on that.
Of course.
And that's what the EQ section is for. And for all of them that you have down here,
so saying that you set up different EQs for the different octaves, the octave up and the sub octaves, then changing the EQ of the input would totally change the characteristics.
That again, and I mean, it's possible with the input EQ section to actually set in such a way that basically the algorithm doesn't get anything to work from. So there's also always the option of messing something up, but you can use the templates to go back to where you were. But it's also a way to basically emphasize a certain character you want. So if you want something that for some reason sustains longer, you can boost certain frequencies and have it pop out more that way.
Cool.
And for all the EQs, so there's basically an input EQ, just to go over those. Then there's a separate output EQ for the two subs. So sub down. Now turn this on, and then there is similarly there's a section for the sub, and there's one for the up. So those are the four sections. So one output EQ section for each of the individual octaves, and then one for the input. So let's go up to the top again. And for each of those sections, you have two selectable EQs that you can use. So you can actually have two different things. So let's start out with something fairly simple that I think most guitar players are familiar with, which would be your high cut. And a high cut, to explain it very briefly, is the knob that you find on most overdrive pedals labeled tone. So if you have like a tube screamer,
and you dial it back,
it removes high end. So it's basically a cut on the high end. So if you imagine your EQ, your sound as flat, then what happens is you roll this off, and this should probably be reversed for you guys out there, but in any case, and that's what it does. So now I can choose. Now I've chosen that it's a high cut.
So this will make the attack softer, or
It'll make the tone less bright.
Yeah.
So we can try to hear that. So right now it doesn't do a lot because we haven't really set it up yet, because we try to make it hard for for the guys out there, so that it's not just one knob, you know, basically rolls down the top end. No, you have to select the frequency, and then you have to select what it does to that frequency. So in this case, now we find the frequency we want to cut off from, and then we can
Adjust the gain structure.
adjust the gain if I can.
Oh, it's not active.
This might be a little bit tricky to see for you guys. In fact, I want to make a mental note to make sure that the difference between the active and the non-active parameters are a little bit easier to see. But for certain of these EQ types, some parameters are not active. And the ones that are active are actually the ones that are kind of, you know, where the round ball here is fat
And the others are
juicy,
grayed
and the
out.
others are, so you can adjust those because they don't make a difference in this setting. So again, let's try out the high cut. So you set it to high cut on the EQ1, and then you use the frequency on the input EQ1 to basically adjust where you want the cutoff to start. So right now it's basically all way up, so it doesn't do anything.
Okay.
And then we can move all the way back. So you notice it took away a little bit of that kind of.
Yeah, the hard, yeah. So that's like a quick gateway to some rounder, more vintage type octave tones.
Similarly, you could also choose the low cut. So the low cut, which is not that typically found in guitar pedals, actually works exactly like a high cut, only reverse. So it's a way to remove the low end if you have something that's too boomy. So a lot of times, if you have, for example, a distortion pedal, which have a tendency to become boomy, distortion pedal builders will have a low cut inside their pedals that you typically can't adjust, but it's there just to make sure that everything doesn't go completely haywire. So, as I said before, the low cut works similarly to the high cut in as you can remove low end. So just for the fun of it, you could actually add both. So you remove low end and you remove high end, and then what you're left with is mid-range. So now we have, it's basically just an extra EQ section. So it works exactly the same way. So if you set them roughly like this, basically what you're saying is you're removing a lot of low end and you're removing a lot of top end.
Cool.
So those are two pretty simple ones.
Yep.
Let's jump to something entirely different. I'll just bypass this one and then go all the way over here to the parametric EQ. Because that's probably, this is a very powerful type of EQ. And the best,
now we suddenly got access to more
there we have
parameters.
access to some more parameters. So the main way to explain a parametric EQ, and there's probably studio guys watching this that are way better at it than me, so apologies for saying anything wrong. Basically, a parametric EQ allows you to zone in on a specific frequency or a frequency range. So you can either go very narrow or very or wider, and basically do something with that particular frequency or frequency range in as either boost it or cut it. So you can do both. So unlike a high cut, which is also always a cut by nature, a parametric EQ allows you to both boost and attenuate a specific frequency. So the best way to kind of show this is saying we set it to parametric, and then what we do is we actually say, let's just boost the hell out of this.
Yeah.
And then we can sweep the frequency spectrum to kind of see what it does. So it, basically it boosts a certain frequency and makes it more apparent. Similarly, you can also, what I've done now is that you can cut something, in this case by 20 dB, and then you. And again, on the input section, in terms of the tonal change, it's not as apparent as it will be on the output section. That's where you really hear the difference in terms of how this basically is more about how the algorithm sees things. So, for example, if you have something where you think the one of the octaves maybe is a little shrill or something, it's a nice way to just kind of tell the algorithm, don't bother with this frequency, remove that, and then you're rid of it.
But it's definitely a pretty powerful tool.
It's a very powerful tool. So, of course, you also have your shelving. So it's basically almost like a cut, but it allows you to actually, let's see if I can explain this properly. So where a low cut or a high cut is basically something that by definition is rolling off something.
Yeah.
And a parametric, on the other hand, is something you can move around and basically boost or lower. A shelving is basically something where you have let's say you have your frequency spectrum like this. You can choose to make it go like this, or you can choose to make it go like this. So it's like a high cut that you can boost, and you can you can kind of massage more. for lack of a better word.
That's the perfect word.
Yeah. And you can choose, using the frequency, where it starts to actually go up or down.
Yeah.
So. And here, down here, which is the slope, which works only for the shelving types. You can choose how much. So basically the slope defines how steep the drop is, or how steep it is going upwards instead when you boost something in this case. So I think that kind of covers the input EQ. There's probably tons more you could ask about, but I think the main fun thing to work with is actually the output EQs. That's the most powerful. Definitely. So, for now, let's just bypass this, and we'll choose something else. We'll choose like the regular polyphonic one, and just set everything kind of at 12 o'clock as a starting point here.
Sounds nice.
Yep. So now we have that going for us. So let's go down to the individual EQ sections. And the first thing I want to show that I think is kind of important is this little thing here, which is the link. The link. And this is pretty simple. The link, if you think, oh God, I can't be bothered having a separate EQ for every single octave. That's just going to take forever, and I don't know what I'm doing anyway. So
it sounds like the parameter for me.
Yeah, it's the parameter for me as well.
Less tweaking, more fun.
Yeah, so basically what it does is that instead, it basically links all three EQs, so you have the same EQ for all three of them. So when you do this, you'll notice that everything down here is grayed out. Yeah. Not counting the modulation block, of course, but all the three EQs are, all the two last EQs are grayed out because it's the sub 2 that kind of rules them all, and those EQ settings are applied to everything.
One EQ to rule them all.
Exactly. It's the Excalibur way. Not the Excalibur. What's it called? Highlander. Highlander way.
There can be only one.
So now I've turned on the link on, which basically means that it's just this EQ controls everything. And right now they're actually on, so let's just turn them off. Let's see, where is the other one? It's here. So here is... So this will give you an idea of what the EQ actually does. So the template that you guys were listening to sounded... I'll just reload it so you guys can hear it. Like this. And now I'll turn off the two EQs, the two output EQs.
So you're definitely losing some of the sub action.
Yeah. And as you can hear, you know, one of the EQs is very deliberately removing that kind of chirpy. So let's try to go over them just to see what's going on behind the scenes. So let's remove this one. So now we only have a high shelving. As you can hear, this is actually the one that removes the that kind of piercing, annoying high end. So we can remove it so you can hear it.
Yeah, that was pretty obvious.
Yeah. So as you can see, it's actually around 140 Hertz. It's cutting by 11 dB. So we can cut by more. In this case, it would be even darker. Or we can cut it by less, so you get it more piercing. Or we can be stupid and basically crank it up 20
I like
dBs.
stupid. No, wait, I hate stupid.
So that's one way of achieving that. Another way of achieving that would be to use the high cut instead and basically set it more or less the same place. Compared to so it's a subtle difference, and I think the best way to explain it is that the shelving EQ will give you more tweakability options. You'll be able to fine-tune something better that you could with the high cut. Whereas the high cut, if you just want to go like, oh God, this is just a little bit too, you know, fingers on a chalkboard, you know, you can use that to just roll off that extra bit of high end and you just, you know, set it where you want it to. So that's the first one. So now we can basically remove that. So we're back to, oh, sorry. And then we can see what the other one did, which was a low shelving one. And as you can see, it's actually around 160 Hertz and up, it's boosting.
It's boosting, yeah.
So it's adding a little bit of low end, not a lot.
Oh, but you can hear it. Yeah.
It just gives a little bit extra punch in the background. And of course, again, you can be like, I can't get enough bass ever. For some reason I like that.
Maybe I should start a Doom band or something.
There you go. So that's a very obvious way of basically tweaking something. And again, you couldn't, in this case, you couldn't do that with the low cut because it's only a cut. With the shelving one, you can actually
like you said,
boost,
sculpt it more.
Yeah, so you can have it go up instead of go down. And then, just for the hell of it, we could also try to do something different, and we can choose the parametric EQ, because in this case we can be way more specific with what we wanna boost. So now we're down in the low frequency. if you want to annoy somebody, or. So here comes in the resonator.
I was just about to ask what.
And to be honest, and I might as well, I don't really know what the technical explanation for that is, but it's basically a way to, as far as I understand it, it's a way to basically spread out the width of the EQ the parametric EQ. So instead of having like a very narrow band that you're expanding, or that you're either boosting or cutting, you basically make it wider.
Yeah. Okay.
That's how I see it anyway. Might be totally wrong, but at least you can hear the difference between. So now it's like it's one little stick going up. If you look at it if you imagine this being like a graphic EQ with all the little faders, this would be one fader going up, and increasing this, it would be multiple of them going up like this around the center frequency.
So if you want to get really nerdy and really nail something, very specific frequency and tone, it's the parametric EQ.
Yeah.
Where the party's at.
There you can do something like that, but obviously you don't get the advantage of being able to kind of say, I want this area, say all the low end, to go away. That's a little bit more tricky with a parametric. So you can either go. I think overall what you can say is either you want to have, if your goal is to have something that basically removes low end or high end, or boosts low end or high end as a more general thing, then either the slope or the high cut and low cut is probably your best choice. But if you want to go like, I just want to, I want to focus in on some kind of, on the mid range or the low end, and I just want to kick the shit out of it, then that's a good way to do that. Or vice versa, if you have a very specific frequency that just annoys your ear tremendously, you can also use the parametric EQ to just zone that in and remove it completely.
That's really cool.
So as I said before, one of the things we tried is just saying, okay, so let's do a high cut and a low cut, and just set the center frequencies around just around 12 o'clock. That will basically remove a lot of the low end and a lot of the high end, and that'll give you more of a mid-range sound compared to opening it up.
So you really have some options here that you don't have with any other Octaver out there.
No,
you totally make your own.
Yeah, it's we went a little overboard, but hey, that's part of the fun. And I mean, this would be a very long video if we actually went into, every single one of these EQ sections.
Yeah.
But basically, what we've done now is saying that all the EQs we've done was applied to every single octave, but you have those options for every single octave. So we could actually say that, as an example, let's say that we think we don't want the 2 octaves down to be too boomy. So in that case, we could have a specific EQ for that and remove a little bit of that low end. And, similarly, we could go, we don't want the octave up to be too piercing. So we could remove a little bit of the high end on that one. And sometimes also, the octave up tends to be a little buried sometimes, so you can just use a parametric to basically
push that
to push it further up. So there's so many options here, and it's a lot of fun. So last but not least, let's go back to the beginning here.
The polyphonic setting.
Let's go to the modulation section.
Yay!
which is always so much fun. So
where the
it's
magic
down
happens.
here. Yes. So the modulation section is basically all the 3 pedals that you guys might know already, which is Corona Chorus, Vortex Flanger, and Shaker Vibrato.
Yep.
Hey, you get those for free with this pedal as well.
Whammy.
The only thing you can't do is you can't add it to the dry signal. You can only add it to the 3 wet signals.
Yeah.
And you can use that for tons of different fun. One of the most obvious ways of using that is, some of you guys might have seen organ simulator pedals out there in the world of pedals.
Mm-hmm. I have one.
And, there's some really cool ones. Basically, what those do at a very fundamental level is having an octaver and some kind of modulation. That's the basis of those pedals. So without saying that you can get exactly the same result, you can get some pretty neat organ-type sounds using the octaver.
You
Sub
can
N Up
definitely
Octaver.
get into the ballpark.
Yeah,
I made
and
some that
use
was fairly convincing.
And use the modulation block along with it.
Yeah.
So let's try some different ones. So most simple is just using the vibrato. Let's see, I have to turn this on first.
That's very important.
It is. Here we go. And it's pretty simple. I mean, you have the speed, so make sure the mix is 100%, because otherwise it's not a vibrato anymore, it's a chorus. And you can crank up there it is. Maybe a little bit too much, but hey, I mean, that's what noodling is for, right?
Exactly.
As you can see, there's quite a few of these parameters that are grayed out that apply only to some of the other ones. One of the things I always find fun with the vibrato in particular, because you actually don't see that on, to my knowledge, any other vibrato out there. Ours have a feedback control, which is what you typically know from a phaser or a flanger maybe, which is basically a regeneration. So it takes the signal and sends it back into itself again. Which gives you some pretty cool sounds, and it can give you that kind of out of phase sound that you sometimes, that you might associate with an organ, compared to the slightly more boring. And you can actually do both two kinds. You can do positive feedback, which we all like, and negative feedback, which in this case we also like. And of course you can use that for pretty much all the other algorithms as well. So on the slightly more nerdy scale, we can do the tri-chorus, which, I don't know, have you guys talked about that already in one of the other videos?
No, not that much. I always found tri-chorus to be a little bit too over the top for me, a bit too 80s.
Yeah.
So I haven't actually messed around too much with that.
I like it because if we can try to compare the regular chorus to the tri-chorus, because the tri-chorus doesn't necessarily have to be more over the top. It's just a matter of how you set it. The main difference is that...
What, you don't max everything?
I do, but you don't have to do it. So the difference is that with the regular chorus, you have one modulation engine. Yeah. So it's basically one wiggly worm going like this, and it can become a little bit obvious that that's what's going on. So let me just exaggerate it a little bit so you guys can hear it, and we'll put the mix down to 50%.
You have some feedback going.
Oh yeah. that would explain something. No, it's not active.
Oh, it's not active.
No. It's just because I have a hell of a lot of depth.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
and that can be an effect of that kind of pulsing, pumping kind of thing. If you want to get that organ sound, you know, that can definitely be an effect you're going for. The nice thing about the tri-chorus, though, is that it's basically 3 of those running at the same time. And the benefit of that is that it kind of camouflages that kind of throbbing sound a little bit. So let's just set them sort of similar. So, you know, now they're not that far apart in terms of the modulation depth. You still get a little bit of that, but it's not as obvious that it's like, you know, that can be a sound you're going for. In that case, cool. But if you want something that's a little bit more
organic
or a little bit more just detuned, you know, the tri-chorus is very nice. And again, this is still pretty drastic. You don't have to do that. You can always, you know, back it down. And the key again is, of course, always to, you know, either mess with the speed or the depth. If you increase the depth, you have to have increase the speed. You have to have less depth overall, vice versa. So it's not that crazy actually. So.
No, I could easily see myself using that.
Yeah.
Make some nice pad like.
So another thing to just, this is kind of tricky to wrap your head around, but the mix is pretty important when it comes to all these modulation effects. Overall, of course, you can say the more you crank stuff, the more, you know, the more extreme it gets. But with something like chorus, it's actually, the mix is important that it's at 50% or around 50%, and that's actually where you get the most dramatic sound. Because if you increase it beyond that, what happens is that you remove, the chorus is really the sound of the dry signal and the wet signal mixed together. And if you crank the mix all the way up to 100%, you just remove the dry signal. So you basically lose that sound and it becomes a vibrato instead. So it's actually not as pronounced as it is down here. But again, it's, you know, it's a matter of taste. So
cool.
That's pretty much, that's the overall editor for this. I think one thing to go over, just to give you guys an idea of what the editor can do, is just basically play a few examples of some of the different templates. Because it can sound very different. And maybe, for the editing guys, maybe we should put that a little bit earlier in the video, so it's not like, oh God, I just want to hear some sounds, and these guys, these clowns talk for 20 minutes, or maybe more. So we'll do that, and this might be the first thing you hear. So this is actually the default setting that you get whenever you start up the editor. That's the sound you get, which is a, you know, pretty neat kind of all-purpose polyphonic octaver. So this is the same kind of thing. It's a little bit more mellow and a little bit darker sounding.
Yeah, and the organ-like characters less apparent.
Yeah. The classic one is definitely designed to sound more like an old school vintage monophonic octaver. And of course, right now it's just the default setting, so of course you can always mess about with the knobs. this works pretty neat for bass as well.
I'd imagine.
So going back to 12 o'clock. And now we get into like more weird territory.
That's interesting.
And so this is actually, the funny thing is this kind of chirpy space ray gun sound is actually something that you can control how much of that you want in the virtual front, as we call it, which is the artist editor that we chose not to have in this final version. But again, there's templates for both, like, you know, sounds where you don't have that at all, and ones where it's like
and Disruptor being one of them.
Yeah, Disruptor is pretty much. So if you like that sound for some reason, you know, you can start with that as a starting point and then go crazy from there. So, you know, this is actually, that type of sound is actually pretty fun when you start cranking the drives. Then you can get some really weird sounds out of it. So here's some very slow flanger, like super slow flanger. So you can hear on this one, we're actually adding some drive to all the octaves to get that kind of almost Leslie Hammond style. Kind of drive to it.
Oh, that one is really cool.
It's just nice to fatten things up.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing where, you know...
Yeah, and there's a flanger on there.
Yeah.
You can hear it.
It's the kind of sound where you kind of go like, if I ever have to start a riff playing by myself before the band kicks in, that's the kind of, you know... That's what you want to start with.
Noisy bass. Hey,
complete with bad tracking and everything.
It sounds like Morten. It's Morten in a box.
Yeah, it is. We can't show this to him. He'll be in here all day. And this one is just, you know, this is just designed to be a very nice polyphonic octaver.
It is really nice.
Without that kind of removing a lot of that. Sometimes they can sound a little artificial. This has almost that kind of monophonic octaving, you know, kind of mellow, dark tone that I personally like a lot.
The organ donor.
Yes.
That sounds pretty convincing.
Yeah. And I don't know, should we go through all of them, or
I don't know.
we can do that. You can use the ones you like.
There's a kind of 80s quality to that. Cool. That one is so cool.
I like that one as well. It's great for these kind of droney kind of playing because it's just so low and
pulsating
in the background. So that's super fun. And I think, you know, to me, that's one of the really cool things about this pedal is the fact that, you know, it can do classic octaving
stuff.
and it can do the polyphonic thing and it can do sort of organ stuff, but, you know, what's really fun is coming up with sounds that, you know, haven't been done before. And there's definitely so many opportunities to do that with this pedal. Again, nice. Sort of an organ-like sound, but with the chirpy thing going on. You can almost, it sounds like there's an alien ship landing just right now.
We want your best coffee.
I know, you know, Morten isn't here, and I'm by no means a bass player, but I know a lot of the bass guys like to use the two subs up while playing high on the neck to simulate kind of synth bass sounds.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a neat sound for that type of thing. And I know that Morten already did some tone prints that, you know, even accentuate that more. So you guys should look forward to that. It'll be fun.
Greatness.
Yes.
Upside down. Boy, you turn me.
Uh-oh. Try to cut this short now.
Boom, more of that.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, I mean, we spent a lot of time kind of going through this now, and I hope at least it gives you and the guys watching
this. I definitely learned something. I hope you guys did too.
And I think, you know, I think the main thing to take away from this is it doesn't really matter, you know, all the technical explanations. I'm sure somebody out there is going like, you know, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It's true, I really don't. I think the main thing to take away from this is the fact that, you know, there are some different options to basically tweak these sounds. And if you have an overall idea of what the different tools do, then you're well on your way to actually
you'll
dance
get there
something.
faster.
Yeah. So that's it.
Cool.
Sub N Up Editor.
Thank you very much, Tor. It was a pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Making me more acquainted with
it was
this
a long,
awesome pedal and what it can do.
Long trip from my desk in here.
Bye, guys.
Ta-ta.